Hello everyone, my name is Sabrina Khairunnisa and I'm going to tell you about the history of English literature. There are some eras in this history. First, the Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxon start from 400 until 1066. The Anglo-Saxon period is the beginning of Britain. Britain's early years were dominated by waves of invaders. What had happened was the Normans had left the island of England at the end of the Roman Empire or in the early 5th century, and a bunch of Germanic tribes, obviously from what we call Germany, they decided to move in. There was the Angles and the Saxons. The Jutes were also there, but they were not nearly as important. The Angles were the dominant group, and they named it Angel Lane for over time and took on a new name that we came to know as England. The characteristic of Anglo-Saxon tradition. The Anglo-Saxon tradition of Druids took a tradition of Druids and such magic, violence, mysteries, and nature. And then the Anglo-Saxon also took the organization from Roman, and they came up with a language, a new one which we now called Old English. The settlement of the Anglo-Saxon. The Anglo-Saxon have the main hall they commonly use for daily activities such as gathering for meals, storytelling, and parties. They also have small villages surrounded by fences to keep out not only outside invaders but also monsters and other evil creatures. Society. Anglo-Saxon society focused on loyalty between leaders and followers. They have pattern in society they should follow. There is God at the top. It could be Christian God or random gods. In the middle there's a king. Next there's a warriors, and the last there's a slaves. All the power came from the king because the king got all of his power from God. The last is religion. Anglo-Saxon religion have the combination between the Druids and Romans, mix of pagan and Christian values. The Anglo-Saxon originally believed there was no afterlife, while Christians believe if there is an afterlife and also believe that are heaven and hell. Anglo-Saxon believe in pride, glory, and honor, revenge, and multiple gods. Meanwhile, Christians believe that there was only one God and believe in merciful and peaceful. The characteristic of work at Anglo-Saxon era. Literature in that time were all about epic hero. There was people who was fighting in brutal conditions. All epic poems concern the action of an epic hero. An epic hero is somebody who is born in a noble sense, character traits that reflect ideals of society and perform courageous. There are some characteristics of an epic poem, such as setting is first involving more than one country. Plot is complicated by supernatural beings or even that involve dangerous journey. Dialogue is long and formal. The theme reflects courage and honor, God and evil, and life and death. Beowulf was one of the literary works of the Anglo-Saxon period. Beowulf probably written in 150 and the author is unknown. The poem was originally recited by Scop, written by a Christian monk, exists written in Old English. Anglo-Saxon stories were a little bit different. They also had a lot of alliteration. Alliteration is repetition of consonant sound at the beginning of word. Casero is a pause dividing each line, and cunning is a mathematical compound word or phrase substitute for a name or a noun. The next era is medieval era. The Middle Age is also known as the medieval era. It was the time between the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 CE and the beginning of Renaissance in the 14th century. Medieval life centered around the church. The church held worship, services, and took care of the sick, poor, elderly, and orphans. The characteristic of the medieval era. The first religion. Life in the Middle Age was characterized by the power of church and the Pope in the general. They used to tell people that they were born to prepare their death, and religion at the time was very important and dominant. Therefore, God was the center of everything. Second is economic. Economic strength is characterized by the development of art and architecture that began to shift from the Eastern Mediterranean to Western Europe. And the last is language. Latin at the time was the dominant language in Western Europe. more precisely because it was the language of religion and authority. Most of the works of the time were written in Latin, and the ordinary people continued to speak and use their vernacular language. Vernacular language was a language mostly spoken by ordinary people in their daily life who couldn't master the Latin language. And the next is the characteristic of the work at medieval era. Poems at medieval era were religious and written by scholars. They are mostly used in churches and other religious events. Next, drama. Drama from the late 14th century onward, two main dramatic genres are discernible: the mystery cycle, Mirza, and the morality plays. The next is prose, a narrative in prose that tells of the adventures and heroic exploit of chivalric heroes at the court of King Arthur, and often a supernatural elements involved. The last is anonymity. The authors of that time used to acknowledge authors before them, and sometimes imitate them to avoid censorship. It was written under anonymity. And the author and the works at the era. One of the best author in this era is Geoffrey Chaucer. Geoffrey Chaucer is an English writer and poet who lived in the 14th century. Geoffrey Chaucer is often referred to as the greatest English poet of the Middle Age, and in addition, Geoffrey Chaucer is also considered the father of English literature. One of his best works is the Canterbury Tales. It tells about the story of a group of 30 people who travel as pilgrims to Canterbury or England. The pilgrims, who come from all layers of society, tell stories to each other to kill time while they travel to Canterbury. Next is Renaissance era. The Renaissance was a profound period of European cultural, artistic, political, and economic rebirth following the Middle Age, generally described as taking place from the 14th century to the 17th century. The Renaissance promoted the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art. And then this era marked a break or transition from the medieval period and led to modern era. The characteristic of the Renaissance era. First, the Renaissance was marked as the beginning of capitalism through the formation of capital holding companies involved in expensive and risky trades to Russia, the Far East, and other long-distance trading sites. The East Indian companies and the West Indian companies all over time provide good profits for the investor. Next is the English population live in rural areas. Cities were crowded, considered dirty, and often dangerous. The biggest problem is public hygiene. No sanitation, sewers, or fresh water sources were purified. Field carts, which paced through the streets daily, attempted to remove the bulk of human and other animal waste. The third is Protestantism is becoming increasingly important and provides a new vision of man's relationship with God. Next is the Renaissance was also characterized by technological advances. The most important, the inventions of printing. The printing effect is widespread but not as fast as we thought. And the last is sailing. These changes are largely gradual and not caused by a single inventor. The last is English Renaissance was characterized by intense national feeling and national pride under the influence of the personality of Queen Elizabeth. Next, the characteristic of the work at Renaissance era. Prose. The prose of the Renaissance didn't have no great impact. The poetry and above all drama had, and a lot of prose works were written in Latin. Poetry. Renaissance poetry is mostly identified with the sonnet, but there were other popular types of poetry such as the song and madrigals. Madrigals is accompanied by the lute and other instruments. Next, drama. Drama was the greatest achievement of the Elizabeth age. It reached the vast popular audience at all levels of society. The plot was simple, and at the end, the audience danced with the actors. The last is the author and the work at Renaissance era. One of the best authors in this era is William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was an English playwright, poet, and actor, widely regarded as the greatest writer in the English language and the world's greatest dramatist. And one of his best work is Romeo and Juliet. This drama tells about the play dramatist the fate of two lovers victimized by the feuds and misunderstanding of their elders and by their own hasty temperaments. And the last era is Revolution and Restoration era. The period from 16,060 to 17,000 is thought as the age of the Restoration. The Restoration of Charles II brought revolutionary change to a new era both in life and in literature. Next, the characteristic of Revolution and Restoration era. First, opening theaters. All institutions closed during the Puritans, its movement were opened during the Restoration period. And then this house became the center of political discussion and from here on. Second is rise of neoclassicism. With the end of the page, literature takes on new passion and view and different attitudes in subject and style. This habit hardened during the age of what we call neoclassicalism. Third, religion. The religion controversy was also going on. It was very bitter. The Protestants and the Catholics were face to face. The nation was predominantly Protestant and the Catholics were being punished. And the last is social and political conflict. Politically, the country is divided into two parties. There are two Whigs and the Tories. Both sides are largely divided into the Anglican Church. But later, the two sides joined forces to end King James II. Next, the characteristic of the work at Revolution and Restoration era. First, poetry. Poetry in this era presents a realistic picture of the courts, society, men, and corrupt manners. And second, drama. The previous theater closed in 16,042 and reopened during the Restoration era. Drama of this era gave rise of the development of comedy matters, which depict the sophisticated life of the dominant class of society. Next, heroic couplet. Restoration literature adopt heroic couplet as poetic mediums. And the last is author's life. Restoration writers have the interest in writing silly things like nature or big philosophical questions. They are interested in all dramatic that takes place in the society in which they live. And then the writers of this period are obsessed with social life, such as who people fall in love with, who they want to marry, who they sleep with, who they betray, and how much money they have or don't have. And the last, the author and the work at Revolution and Restoration era. There is John Milton. John Milton was an English poet, polemist, man of letters, and a civil servant for the Commonwealth of England under Oliver Cromwell. And one of his best work is Paradise Lost. It tells the story of the fall of man, a story of extraordinary drama and excitement. Okay, that's all from my explanation. Sorry if I have a mistake, and thank you.